Good morning. Good morning. We welcome you again this morning to another opportunity to worship God and to give Him praise and glory. We have some who are missing this morning because they weren't feeling well. We have some who are probably taking advantage of this last long weekend before really buckling down to get back to school and back to work and that sort of thing. So we pray that they are all safe and well. We're certainly thankful for each and every one of you that are here this morning, and those of you that are taking the time at home to listen to our live stream, or later on in the day perhaps to listen to the sermon when it's posted up on YouTube. Again, we thank God for those avenues to bear witness to His grace and mercy, and trust that we continue to be thankful to Him for that grace, that we're mindful of all those that stand in need of our prayers, those that we know of, and the multitudes that we don't know. I'm thankful that it's not up to me to have to acquaint God with the needs of any of His children anywhere, but that He is everywhere present and nowhere absent, and that He knows our needs. That is a great blessing. The Lord's blessed us with a little hint of fall in the air this morning. And, after weeks of 175% humidity, it sure does feel nice. Very thankful for God's grace and mercy upon us, and that He is in control. Even of the humidity, and that it works according to His will and purpose. And would to God that we might learn to be thankful for what He sends every day. Because He knows how to give good gifts unto His children. And even in those things that come to us day by day that might not seem to be so good, then we need to learn to be thankful for God's grace and mercy that brings us through it, so that it all might abound to His praise and glory. I invite you to turn this morning to Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians, 2nd chapter. I'm going to begin reading at the 10th verse. 1 Thessalonians 2:10. And Paul writes and says this: "Ye are witnesses, and God also, how holy and justly and unblameably we behaved ourselves among you that believe, as ye know how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you, as a father doth his children, that ye should walk worthy of God, who hath called you unto His kingdom and glory. For this cause also thank we God without ceasing, because when ye received the word of God which ye heard of us, ye received it not as the word of men, but as it is in truth, the word of God, which effectually worketh also in you that believe." Now there are a phrase here that Paul uses a couple of times, in the 10th verse and again in the 13th, that are important, because he says, "to you that believe." If you don't believe that the Bible is the inspired Word of God, then, as I've said before, this is not going to mean much to you. If you don't believe that the Spirit of God moves in His people and reveals His Word and teaches us according to His will and purpose, then this isn't going to mean much to you. If you do not believe that this is the Word of God and that the Word that we preach is inspired by God, then you're not going to see or be concerned with whether or not we behave ourselves well, whether we behave ourselves holily and unblameably and justly. It seems that there's very little concern in this world anymore for those that strive to live holily or purely in a manner that's pleasing unto God. There's a very skewed perception in the world anymore of what is just. Of course, if you don't believe, then what I see the Word of God teaching as being just is going to seem just as skewed to you as everything else. So, if you believe that this is the Word of God, if you believe that there is a God, if you believe that He is in control of everything that He has set in motion from the beginning, if you believe that He is still the one power that holds all things in His hand, that sets the bounds of the ocean, that hung the stars in the sky, and that calls them all by name, then that alone should be enough to cause you to have great rejoicing. And not to be overly concerned with those that think you're foolish or insane. Because you know, the truth of the matter is that even if you did not believe that this was the inspired Word of God, the truth of the patterns that are set forth, if men lived by the truth that's written in this Word. And I understand what I'm saying now. If men lived by the truth that is in this Word, there are a lot of men that would claim to live this way. History is full of men that pretended or claimed to live according to this Word, that committed all manner of atrocities against their fellow man. They called themselves Christian. There was nothing Christian about the way that they behaved or about the way that they went about doing things or about the hate that they harbored in their hearts. And there are still men today that will tell you that they are Christian, that harbor hate in their hearts towards men because that they think differently or speak differently or look differently or part their hair differently. I'm going to tell you that no man can truly call himself Christian and hate his fellow man. Now, we might hate the deeds that are done. Because we should not love that which is unjust. We should not love that which is ungodly. We should not love that which is not pure before the sight of God. But that does not give us leave to treat those that do things of that nature unjustly. That does not give us leave. You must the principle that Jesus gave us, and if every man would live to this, what a world we would live in. Whether you believe that Jesus was the Son of God or not, if we lived according to that principle that we grew up with, being called the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Now, some people present that as though if you treat people right, people are going to treat you right. Well, I'm sorry to inform you that if you're trying to go under that premise, that you are in for a sad state of disappointment. You can treat people just as right as you know how, and there are still people in this world that are not going to reciprocate that. They're not going to treat you right. I don't care how you treat them. But you see, it wasn't a promise that we'd be treated right if we treated others right. It was a principle that we should treat other people like we want to be treated, regardless of how they treat us. You see, that liberates me. And if they don't reciprocate that, that's on them. But think about what a world that would be if everybody treated everybody else like they want to be treated. Nobody wants to be treated like they're stupid. Nobody wants to be treated like they don't matter. Nobody wants to be treated like their life is insignificant. We all would like to be treated with a measure of respect and a measure of concern, wouldn't we? Well, now, like I said, I'm not going to promise you, and neither did Jesus promise you, that the world would treat you that way, that everybody that you come in contact with is going to treat you that way. But what he was telling us is that if we live, and this I believe is what Paul was talking about whenever he said that you know, and God is our witness, that we have lived holily and unblameably and justly before you. What Paul was saying is we have treated every man like we want to be treated, whether they have treated us that way or not. Paul wasn't saying that he was a perfect being. Paul wasn't saying that he never had any bad thoughts. Paul wasn't saying that he and his brother never did get down in the dumps. I'm sure that there were days when Paul was sitting bound up in those prisons. I'm sure that Paul had days when he thought, you know, this just ain't right. I'm sure there were days when he had to have wondered if anybody in the world cared about him anymore. He even bore testimony to having those feelings now and then. But in almost the same breath, he would then tell you how that God sent someone to minister to him. How that God, in one way or another, made his presence known to him. And I'm going to tell you that for each and every one of us that believe, we must bear testimony in our lives that there are times that we know that God has comforted us. Perhaps it was by the moving of the Spirit within, and perhaps it was by moving someone to come and touch our lives in such a way that we received help from an area that we never expected, that we found kindness from a place that we never dreamed it would come. Whatever the case may be, that it was extraordinary enough in our lives that we knew that it was not just the hand of men, but the hand of God. We ought to rejoice. We ought to be happy. We ought to be praising him. This pandemic is a hateful thing. It makes us do things we don't want to do. Got to wear that old mask every time I walk out the door. If I get halfway to the store and forget it, then I got to turn around and go back to the car and get it before I go in. Aggravates the old flesh. Some people will tell you it don't do a bit of good. Other people will tell you that it's going to save your life. I'm going to tell you that I don't necessarily believe in either of those extremes. What I do know is that if my neighbors around me think that it's going to help protect them, then I'm certainly not going to give them any reason to think that I don't care about protecting them. I'll put the silly thing on if that's what I need to do. Even if it does make my ears flop out funny and gets irritating and I can't breathe good. And I know all the reasons because I have them too. But ultimately, it comes down to this, doesn't it? If I thought that you doing that was going to help me, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If I want you to do something that I think is going to protect my life, then it's only right that I do things that you think may help protect yours. That's not an ungodly thing, and it's not an unreasonable thing, and it's for me not anything to do with any lack of faith in God's power. I know there is not anything that God can do. I know that if the building caught on fire, God has the power to let me stand in the middle of it and not be harmed. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Unless he tells me to stand still in the middle of it, I'm not going to wait for him to tell me to get out. You see, He gives us grace to understand sometimes the needs around us. And that includes the needs of those that we walk among, live among, labor among, those that we love, those that we care for, those that we pray for, and the stranger that we have no idea who they are or what their circumstances might be. Ye are witnesses, and God also, how holy and justly and unblameably we behaved ourselves among you that believe. You see, that's another thing that I share with Paul. You know, I don't want anybody to think bad of me. But above all things, I want to live in a way that God can witness that I have lived purely and justly and honorably before Him and before those that believe. And if other people have a problem with that, then they'll have to have a problem. You see, the last thing that I need is to wonder in my life if I have lived my life according to the calling of God in my life. And ye know how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you as a father doth his children. Now, I know that there are some of you here that are older than I am. Not many of you here that would be old enough to actually be a parent. That's changed a lot over the years. There was a time that when I stood before the Lord's people, most everybody in there, 2/3 of the folks that I was speaking to, were old enough literally to be my parents. I've kind of progressed into that group now, by God's grace and mercy. But still at the same time, that God, whenever He puts that love and that calling in our lives and in our hearts, and we begin to labor and minister to God's people, we have a feeling of affection and of concern for them that goes beyond that which is natural, goes beyond that which is according to nature. And by God's grace and mercy, I'll assure you that Paul wasn't the oldest person that he was ministering to. Matter of fact, the best we can find out, Paul was a pretty young man whenever he started out on that path. And yet he always had the heart of a father toward them to believe. Not because he thought he was something, but because he knew his God was. And whenever a man of God comes to stand before you and preach the gospel unto you, I don't care if he's 16 or if he's 67 or whatever the case might be. Whenever God blesses him and He speaks to you, and He speaks to you with the authority of a father, you listen to that word as coming from someone who has your best interest at heart, who has your love set before His eyes according to the will and the purpose of God, and that is concerned about your welfare and you doing well in the service of God and in the love of God and in the peace of your lives. He said, we've exhorted you as a father doth his children, that ye would walk worthy of God. It's important to understand language. Sometimes we have to dig for the meanings of some of these things. Because if you're not careful, you're going to read that and think, well, I can actually live in a way that makes me deserve to belong to God. You know, if you go for a job, you know, we call it an interview. Sometimes you got to go for 2 or 3 of those and 4 or 5 tests, and what you're trying to do is prove that you are worthy, that you deserve for them to hire you for that position. Now, from the standpoint of being good enough on our own, there's nothing that we'll ever do that makes us worthy of God in that aspect of worthiness. But there is much that we can do, that we walk in such a way that gives God praise and honor and glory in our lives, and that we live in such a way that we don't have to go around waving a flag and saying that we're different or that we're Christians, but that people look at our lives and they see God in us. That's what it means to walk worthy of God, is to be worthy of the name. You see, even as a young man, I have enough love for my father and mother that I wanted to be worthy of their name, that I wanted to be worthy of people knowing that they were my parents. I wanted to be worthy of them not being ashamed of me. Now, they were my parents by the fact that I was born unto them. My worthiness didn't have anything to do with them being my parents. So it wasn't that I was wanting to do something that would make me deserve to be theirs. I was theirs. But I wanted to live in such a way that I felt like they would not be ashamed that I bore their name. You see, I want to walk in such a way that my God would never have to be, that my Lord would never have to be ashamed of me. And again, this has got nothing to do with our eternal salvation. What did Jesus tell us? He said, if you're ashamed of me before men, I will be ashamed of you before my Father. It wasn't talking about our eternal salvation. I'm persuaded that there are a lot of God's people in the world that know who He is and that know something about His power, but because it's not popular, because it doesn't set them up socially for the way that they want to be viewed, or because they think somebody's going to think they're a little crap because they actually believe in a God who has power and authority in this world, they hide that. They're ashamed of that. And I'll assure you this, if we in any way, shape, form, or fashion are ever ashamed of God and how He has called us, of what He has done in our lives, and how He has called us to live our lives in His kingdom, when we are ashamed of Him, we are not worthy of Him. Doesn't mean we don't belong to Him. You see, I want to, according to Paul's admonition, I want to walk worthy of God. I want to live a life that honors God. I want to live a life that is pleasing to Him because it's good and right. That you would walk worthy of God who hath called you unto His kingdom and glory. Now notice, their worthiness, or God's calling them to His kingdom and glory, wasn't tied to their worthiness. Paul wasn't telling them to walk worthy so God will call you to His kingdom and glory. He said that you would walk worthy of God who hath. See, that calling to His kingdom and glory had already taken place. That was a sure thing. It was done. Paul wasn't telling them you've got to be worthy for that occurrence in your life. He's telling us that when we have that occurrence in our lives, to live worthy of it, to give honor to it, to walk in such a way that says, yes, I believe. That yes, I believe that there is one true and living God, and that one God is three, and that is God the Father, and God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And no, I don't pretend to understand how all that works, and no, I don't have to. Now, some people call that blind faith. I'm going to tell you, when it comes to the things of God, that those terms are mutually exclusive. You can't be blind and have faith in God. It is not blind faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen. Blind people don't see evidence. A blind man has never been an eyewitness. And we are eyewitnesses of the mercy and the grace and the love of God. We are eyewitnesses of the redemption of what He has done, because we have it in our lives. We can see it in our own lives. We can see it in the lives of He has made us witnesses to the calling of His love and mercy and grace in the lives of those around us, and to the drawing of them into His kingdom. And we ought to walk worthy of that and give Him praise. Not because that'll make Him do it, but because He's done it according to His will and purpose. And He is worthy of honor and glory. For this cause also, what cause is that? For this cause also thank we God without ceasing. Because when ye received the word of God, which ye heard of us, ye received it not as the word of men, but as it is in truth the word of God. When the gospel is preached to you, do you hear the man that stands before you? Do you wonder how many hours of study he put into that? How long it took him to get that sermon together? And I'm not telling you we don't study. And I'm not telling you that we don't seek the leadership of God's Spirit to know what to study, what to impart, how to impart things unto His people. What I'm asking you is, when the gospel is preached unto you by me or any other man, is it my words you're hearing? Or do you believe that it's God's word that you're hearing? And if you believe that it's God's word that you're hearing, and not just Brother Mike's word that you're hearing, that ought to make you very careful about paying attention to that word, and about laying it up in store, and about treasuring it in your heart, and about walking in it and living in it and giving God glory for it. And I'm afraid that there are a lot of people that come to church and sit and hear the preaching of the gospel, and they may come up and tell you what a good sermon it was, and how much they enjoyed it, how much they appreciated what you had to say, and they go out the door and they don't remember a word that was said to them. And you know why? Because it wasn't perceived as being from God. I don't think there's any of us that truly believe in God. That if God saw fit to appear in a physical form and walk in this building today, and if He began to tell things to you, do you think you'd pay attention? Would you listen? Would you try to absorb just as much of it as you could hold on to? And would you walk out the door determined to do that which the Lord had said do? You see, when we leave God's house, and there's nothing that we have heard that we take with us, there's nothing that's been said in song or prayer or preaching that moved us, not physically necessarily, but that moved our soul, and that caused and called our hearts to sit up and take notice. If that wasn't there, then I am fully persuaded that we didn't hear the word of God. We thought we were listening to some man. And I will simply say this to you. Why would you want to come on Sunday morning to listen to a man? Why would you want to sit down any time and listen to a man? Because we've all proven that we're biased. We got a skewed view of things. I don't care who you are. I don't care how balanced you think your opinion is. And we all tend to think our opinions are pretty balanced, don't we? But I learned something a long time ago. That I can't really appreciate what somebody else has been through unless I have shared that experience. And there are a lot of experiences in this life that I can't say that I have a personal knowledge of. So I can't have exactly the view that those that have gone through it have. But when we have, by God's grace and mercy, been called to live these things, to hear these things, to be recipients of these things, for them to stir our hearts, it ought to make a difference in our lives. This is how that we walk worthy of God, is for His Word, for us to take what we hear, and that if we believe in Him, then we believe that He has sent us His Word, and that we take His Word, and that it makes a difference in the way we live our lives. That His Word, that the hearing of it, and that the receiving of it, and that the believing of it, as though it came directly from Him, because it is His Word, it did. I used to play trumpet many, many years ago. And I could set that thing on the table. I could lay it on the bed. I could put it in its case. Not one time did I ever hear that thing make a toot, unless I was blowing through it. If I am God's servant, and if I am faithful to that service, and if I come before you as the faithful servant of God, the words that you hear aren't mine. I pray God that they are not mine. The things that move you aren't me. I pray God they never are. What I hope that you will always understand and perceive is that I'm just like that trumpet I used to play. Unless God picks me up and blows through me, there's not going to be any sound worth hearing. And I'll tell you something else. It's got to be somebody that knows the instrument. Now, my dad learned to blow through my trumpet. Nobody would ever mistake what he did as playing a trumpet. He liked my trumpet for one thing. I used to be slow about getting up in the morning sometimes. And especially on Sunday morning when I was, it was time to get up and I wasn't starting around fast enough. One of his chief delights in those days was to sneak into my room and to get my trumpet, throw the covers over my head, and get on the bed where he had me pinned under the covers with his knees on either side, and set the bell of that old trumpet against my head and say, "Time to get up!" But I never heard that trumpet make any kind of certain sound. I never heard anything that sounded like a tune. You see, I don't want to just be blowing a horn. I don't want, and if I'm doing it, that's all I'm doing. But if the Master of heaven and earth is pleased to take me and to sound His gospel through me, I want you to understand this morning that it is His gospel. That if it's truth, it is His truth. That if it's just and righteous, it is His justice and His righteousness. And that if you are able to believe that that comes from Him, and if it effectually works in you that believe, that work is His. I pray that I might always say of you that for this cause, that I thank God without ceasing. Because that as you have received the word of God, you have not treated it as though you received it from me, but as though it was received from God. May you always lay hold on his word with the recognition that it is his word. And in so doing, I assure you that you will find yourself walking worthy of God. May God bless and keep you in my prayer.